All right, all right, all right. Hello, everybody. I hope I'm audible. So we are here for the roundtable, getting the incentives right, rethinking how we define academic success. So let me introduce myself. I'm Rahul Gaurav, joining in from Paris Brain Institute, France. And I'm the social media and communication manager elect of the OHBM SPSIG. And we have our friend Elisa Guma, the blog editor of our SPSIG, and she's joining in from McGill University, Canada. So over to you, Elisa.
Hello. Thanks, Rahul. We're really excited to be here with you today. Unfortunately, Cooper Smout is unable to attend the live Q&A today, but we're going to stream the recording we took from the one he did on Monday. So you can still enjoy some of the content this way. And just a few little reminders, be sure to check out some of our other workshop events. You can attend some live Q&As at 9 p.m. EDT as well. And be sure to check out the socials. And if you're interested in joining our team, we will be looking for new members for the next year. So stay tuned for details on that. And with that, Rahul and I will leave you with the Q&A from Monday, and we hope you enjoy the content. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
So sorry for the slow to start, everyone who's in Sparkle. I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Cooper Smout, who is going to summarize and then be here to answer questions and have a nice discussion around the topic of how we incentivize science and how that structure is quite broken and what we can do to think about that in a different way and maybe change the system that we're working within. Cooper has a PhD in cognitive neuroscience that he got at the Queensland Brain Institute up in Brisbane in Australia, and up relative to me, probably not for everyone else online right now. His work there in in that process, he discovered some of these flaws and then started to devote himself almost entirely, even while doing his PhD, to this new project, and then upon completion really dove into it wholeheartedly, and yeah, it's really inspirational work. So I'm looking forward to hearing more and having a chat with you, Coops. Thank you.
Great. Okay, great, cool. Thanks, Megan, for the very lovely introduction. Nice to see you again. So yeah, I'll be taking you through a very quick summary of the 20-minute video that I uploaded. It's hard to cover this space in 20 minutes, let alone 5 minutes, but I'll do my best. So as Megan mentioned, I did my PhD at Queensland Brain Institute, discovered that academia is broken, in my opinion, and started to work on some open science solutions. The part that you missed out is that the last year I've been funding myself playing poker, which is sort of taken a bit of time away from what I would like to devote to open science, but more recently have won a little bit of funding to move into meta research, which you can think of as sort of research on research. And so that's what I'll be moving into in the coming year. And so in the talk, I go through the 4 major crises that we're facing today. And the first of these is access. And this is basically the idea that the vast majority of the research that we publish is not accessible to the general public. And this is quite sad considering that we've had decades to try and solve this problem, decades since the internet became a thing. And we've also pumped billions of dollars into the open access movement. The second major crisis is the reproducibility crisis, and this speaks to the fact that both statistical modeling as well as large-scale replication studies have shown that the majority of published findings in multiple fields, including psychology, are simply non-replicable. And the third crisis is the serials crisis, and this pretty much talks to the economic problem in academia. And at the core of this is the fact that the publishing system is controlled and owned by a handful of very powerful and profitable corporations, commercial publishers. And ultimately, this means that billions of dollars are being drained from the scientific ecosystem every year, and means that we're not in control of how or what we publish. And so sort of feeding into that is this evaluation crisis, which speaks to the fact that we're pretty much rewarded and incentivized, or I guess evaluated based on where we publish, as in the journals that we publish, as opposed to what we actually publish. And this has all kinds of ramifications on the scientific ecosystem and affects us in our daily lives. And in my opinion, is the core of the problem, because the way that we're evaluated feeds into how we're rewarded, and that effectively sets up the incentivization structure that controls our behaviors. And so to me, the core of the issue is fixing this evaluation structure, because that will then feed into all of these other crises that I just outlined. So this takes me to the open science revolution. And open science means different things to different peoples. So to some people, it's a set of principles, to others, it's a set of practices, and to yet others, it's a set of values that we might strive to achieve. But open science also needs to be considered in the cultural context of science. And Brian Nosek has this really cool slide that sort of shows you all of the layers of change that need to happen for open science to become a thing. Now, the first two layers are pretty much solved. So this is the infrastructure and the user interface. And to demonstrate how these two layers have been solved, this is a really cool slide showing you that at every single step of the research lifecycle, there are free open source tools that you can use today to make your research more open and more collaborative and more reproducible. So the question is then, why are we not already doing this? And some part of this problem is that there's this implicit assumption that being more open might be in some way antagonistic to your career. And so this really speaks to this layer of this cultural change diagram, the incentive structure. So in the talk, I went into this in more detail, but I just want to highlight here that first of all, we need to sort of educate ourselves and understand that actually being open can actually help our career. So there's lots of evidence now that's showing making your research openly available in terms of the paper itself, open access, and also the data, open data, can increase citations. And when you consider that citations are the bedrock of the academic evaluation system, it shows that openness can actually be perfectly aligned with your career goals. Now, the second thing that I went into in the talk is registered reports. And this is kind of a new model that's come out in the last sort of 5 or so years. And basically says that instead of just waiting until the end of the life cycle to review your research, you should also review it prior to collecting data and analyzing that data. And this does two key things. It means that you can now get feedback at the time when it's actually useful, right? Before you conduct your experiment and find out there's some flaw that you didn't consider. But also, if you get pre-acceptance at one of these journals that is adopting this format, then you can now lock in a publication with one of these journals and not have to stress about what the luck of the results might be that are beyond your control. So you can just focus on doing good work. And that then means that you're incentivized to just do high quality work without sort of fudging the results or doing anything else like that. So this is a slide that I actually missed in the original talk, and I think I should have kept in because it really does speak to the incentivization structure and really the vision or the dream of what science could become one day. And so in addition to registered reports, which I just talked about, there's other models that have been developed and are even active today that take this idea even one step further and say that instead of just 2 review cycles, we should actually have review cycles throughout the entire life cycle of the research process. And in addition to that, we should be publishing as we go. So this means that you might publish a literature review and get that reviewed. And then you might publish your hypotheses, and then you could publish your analysis plans, your protocol. And then you could publish your data, your analysis, finally your discussion. And then all of these stages could get reviewed independently. And what this would mean is that we could have this kind of dynamic, ongoing process that would really encourage and foster collaboration in a really exciting and dynamic way. Another idea that's quite tightly coupled to that idea of modular publishing is post-publication peer review. And this is just the idea that instead of having a paper that sort of becomes fixed in time and doesn't ever get reviewed ever again, we should actually be ongoing, reviewing in an ongoing and dynamic fashion. And the kind of analogy you can use here is like the open source movement. where code gets developed openly and collaboratively over time, we could have something like that for science using one of these models. And also coupled to these other two ideas is this idea of numerical evaluation. So this is the idea that instead of just evaluating on a singular dimension, as in the journal, we should really be evaluating articles on their own merits and also on multiple dimensions of interest. So for example, those might be novelty, replicability, transparency, you name it. But basically moving from the journal level single, so the journal impact factor evaluation, to a more complex and nuanced evaluation system. Now, the reason I think this slide is really important, and I should have included in the first talk, is it speaks to the future of what science could become. But the problem is that many of these models have been developed and even exist today, and have even existed for, say, 5 years in some cases, but they're just not reaching the levels of adoption that we need. And to speak to the incentivization problem, if you were to take any one of these models and imagine that every single person in your community was already using it, say everybody was already using pre-review to review preprints, or was already using Octopus to publish at every stage of the research lifecycle, then that would become the incentivization system, right? Because universities would have to respect the fact that everyone in our field was already doing this, and therefore they would look at anyone who wasn't doing this as the outlier, and therefore they wouldn't be rewarded for adopting this practice. And so the question is then really, how do we get from where we are, which is trapped in this kind of journal-based system, to this future of science communication as we might want it to be? And this then is why I think we are stuck at this community phase of the transition cycle, where we need to think about ways that we're going to make these new practices that we want to adopt normative so that we can create the incentives ourselves. And so that brings me to the project that I've been developing the last couple of years, and this is called Project Free Our Knowledge. And you can think of it as a collective action platform for researchers. So the way it kind of works is like Kickstarter, but whereas Kickstarter is trying to kickstart products, Free Our Knowledge is trying to kickstart behavioral change in the academic community so that we might one day get to those sort of future visions for science that I outlined in the previous slide. So the way it works is that anyone can propose an action that they want their peers to adopt. Now, this might be something like posting a preprint, submitting a registered report, sharing your data, or sharing a review openly on some platform. Any like open science behavior that you think should be the norm in your community. And when you propose this campaign, you also set some critical mass that you want people to adopt. So this might be 100 pledges, it might be 1,000. It's really up to you and what you think the goals of the campaign should be. Then we put it on the website and we just put it out to the crowd. Now at this point, the key thing is that people can be anonymous and they can pledge, but they don't have to take action until that critical mass is met. And so if the critical mass doesn't get met, that's fine, nothing happens, no further action. But if we do reach that 100 or 1,000 pledges, or even just 10 pledges, then everyone who has pledged gets listed on the website and then takes that action together. And the idea here is that now we can move forward as a community, right? We can now create new norms as a collective cohort rather than sending off one person at a time to try and create change on their own, and in the process possibly get sacrificed on the altar of science. So this is the vision for how I think this could evolve and hopefully one day kickstart the types of really progressive models that I outlined before. I think we could start quite small with pledges that span a number of different directions like I outlined before, and just have quite small targets like tens or hundreds of people at a time. But over time, as we learn what works as a campaign and where there is interest in different fields and different practices, we could start to build bigger and bigger campaigns as this idea gains traction. And down the track, we could potentially be hosting campaigns that have tens of thousands, I don't know, maybe even hundreds of thousands of people signing up to take action together. So I wanted to highlight that we posted a campaign that I would love people to check out and sign if you feel comfortable. And this is just asking you to pre-register a single study in the next 2 years once 100 people in our field have taken that pledge. But really, as I said, the platform can be used in any way to create any kind of cultural change or instantiate any new norm that you want to see in your field. So this might be submitting a registered report, like I mentioned before, sharing preprints. But these two ones in red are actually two campaigns that have been proposed on our GitHub repository since I recorded the talk. And they are to review an article using pre-review or to share code associated with every article you publish. So these campaigns are now at the sort of development stage, and I would love people to check out our GitHub repository and add comments, or even just add a thumbs up just to show that you like this idea and would potentially sign it when we turn it into an actual campaign. And then once we've developed those campaigns on GitHub, like I said before, we'll post them on the website and put them out to the crowd. And at that point, you can take the pledge. But really, if you have ideas, I would love for people to get in touch and collaborate on this, because all of the systems have been set up so that you can basically create any campaign that you want and put it out to the crowd and see if there's interest. So these are some ways you can get involved. The email, we're on Twitter and Facebook at Project FOC, and that's the website, freeourknowledge.org, and the GitHub repository is Free Our Knowledge. And with that, I guess I would like to thank you for tuning in, all of the contributors that have helped out on this project, and our partners that have helped extend our reach thus far, as well as OHBM and the student and postdoc SIG for inviting me to lead this workshop. And now I guess we turn it over to the crowd for questions and discussion time. Thanks, everyone. Oop, one slide too many.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smout. Thank you for this very inspiring talk. I really feel that you're doing a pioneer work with this project, because it's really like taking concrete actions toward the goal of having a more different research world and with the values that scientists, I feel, all would have, but there is a gap definitely between the actions and like the actual system right now. So it's really inspiring to see these actions. And following up on like the different measures that you talked about at the end on how to make it more the norm, I was wondering, what do you think could be the metrics that universities could use to evaluate the work of a scientist? Because right now it's mainly like the number of papers, the number of grants, and as you say, like in which journals. And you talked about like how novel and reproducible a paper could be. And so I was wondering if you could extend on that, on how we could evaluate scientists for positions or for grants also in a more open and fair way, and to value these notions that you mentioned.
Thank you. Yeah, great question. So yeah, like as you say, I think moving beyond this sort of unidimensional journal level metric to article level metrics on a number of different criteria is a great step forward. Personally, like all of the platforms that have taken on this type of idea, as far as I can tell, have just kind of arbitrarily chosen a number of metrics. And I think what we should be doing, and what I'm planning to move into with the funding I've got, is to try and understand what research communities want to see evaluated. And so we can really like start to like empirically validate and test what types of metrics we should be testing, and also like how they relate to one another and how they predict future outcomes. So I think that's step one, is try and understand evaluation itself, because really, like quite surprisingly, as much as this is the bedrock of academia, we still have very little understanding of what goes on in the peer review process and what dimensions people actually are interested in exploring and evaluate research on. So I think that would be step one. To sort of speak to what I think the future could become and what I think would be an effective system, to me, the goal really is to align practice with the reward. Because once we can do that, things will accelerate. Like people will start adding like appropriate value to the system and getting rewarded for it. And a model that I think could work quite well is Stack Exchange. For people that aren't familiar, Stack Exchange is basically a coding website where anyone can ask a question and then anyone else in the community can provide a reply. Now, there'll be a number of different replies, and people can then come along and upvote or downvote one particular reply. And the original poster can also select, I think Stack Exchange does this, they can select one answer that they prefer from all of the options. And what evolves out of this system is a kind of reputation score. So if you're consistently providing good replies and people are consistently upvoting your reply, then over time your reputation score builds. And I think that's like a very simple version of something that we could do in academia. Like you can imagine something much more complex and something that we could study over time and validate actually does create the behaviors that we want to see. But something like that, I think, would be really powerful, because now, I mean, imagine the ramifications. Like you could even imagine like a grant committee with a sum of money that they want to distribute to a number of researchers. Instead of going through this ridiculously long peer review process that is basically at chance and wastes everybody's time, they could just now like look at the past history that's been validated by the community to see who is providing value to this system and reward people appropriately. Now, obviously you'd have to, the main concern would be sort of social dynamic networks like we see in Twitter and Facebook, where, the popular people simply just get amplified and they constantly would get the money and that sort of thing. But those are the sorts of problems that I think we can address if we have data, which we don't have right now. And then if we have a sort of a method and a process for evaluating the behavioral outcomes of that system appropriately. Does that answer your question?
Yes, definitely.
And just to bounce off it, like, as you said at the end, there's the risk there that the popular kids keep getting upvoted, but that's already the case. Like the snowballing effect of grants, success, and who as the chief editor that you had a drink with at the conference, that can't help but help you get your paper in at the big journal. So it's already that. And at least if we had metrics on it, we could kind of evaluate where that's going and how that's being biased. So yeah, I think that's a really exciting idea. I kind of wonder what you think of, like, there's this community swell that we can gain and try and build amongst ourselves as ECRs, and hopefully with a few CIs and PIs jumping in as well to put their weight into it. But do you think the crux really is convincing some funding bodies that they need to adjust their metrics beyond the research output measure of track record? Like now some of them are saying they need open publication and you need to account for that in your costings. So yeah, is that kind of going to be the tipping point, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the ultimate solution is a combination of top down and bottom up, right? So I think like funders lack information about what researchers actually want and what there is support for. And a great example of that is, like the Plan S. Plan S, for anyone that doesn't know, is this plan that a number of European funders got together and proposed that everything should be open access by the year, I think it was 2021 originally, but now it's been pushed back a little bit. And this has been, like you alluded to, Megan, has been sort of driving the open access movement in recent years. But the problem is, I guess, well, there's a few problems. When they posted that campaign, there was a large reaction from subsets of the research community that were reacting to this idea that they should be sort of forced to publish in particular journals, and also reacting to the idea that this proposal really supports this expensive pay to publish open access model. When the reality is we don't need that model. Like, we have the internet. We could be sharing preprints freely, openly available. And if we were to use these progressive, preprint review platforms like pre-review, then we could be reviewing for free as well. Like, we don't need to be paying $3,000 to publish in whatever expensive open access journal. And so I guess the point I was going to make is that publishers don't really have a clear perspective right now on what the research community want, because we're not providing that data. Like, if we were to sort of I guess that's one of the benefits, I think, of free our knowledge, is that we can start to indicate what we would want to adopt if we weren't alone in doing it. And that at least gets some data on the table. Now we can say, hey, look, in our community, there's massive adoption for pre-registration, or there's massive adoption for, register reports, if the funders can provide the financial means to make that happen and help convert journals and whatever other processes. So that, I think, is step one, like show data that we are in support of these practices. And without that, it's very difficult for them to negotiate the difficult space that they're stuck in. And then the second point I want to make is that, and this is something I said in the original talk, but I don't think we should be sitting around waiting for funders or universities to sort this stuff out. Because at the end of the day, like Plan S really is a mandate to force researchers to publish in a certain way. But ultimately, it's us that has to change our behavior anyway, because ultimately it's us that is the system and is creating this incentive structure, right? So if we're waiting for these kind of slow, gargantuan organizations to change their processes, I think we're going to be waiting a very long time. And this is kind of what's been happening the last 2 decades since the internet became a thing. A lot of researchers have been complaining and kind of waiting for funders or universities to change their practices and fix it for us. But ultimately, I think it's really down to us to create the change that we want to see. And that really is like what inspired me to start Free Our Knowledge. It was kind of looking at what I could do. And I didn't feel comfortable, say, boycotting Elsevier or something like that, because, there's so many journals in our field that are published by these big publishers. But I felt that if I could definitely at that point sign a pledge that said, if 1,000 other people did it, then I would feel more comfortable. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, why for me it always comes back down to individual actions and just looking at what we can do to create that change that we want to see.
It's really actually like inspiring and a positive framework to come from, because yeah, that feeling of disempowerment flips around and it's like, actually we're in the system, it's our system, we can join together and make change. It's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm part of the choir, so.
The converted. Yeah, but like on the responsibility side of things, like I think it is important to recognize that every single like little action that we have that might seem insignificant is actually the whole system is the sum of those individual actions. So if you don't like the fact that we're not in control of science and actually a whole bunch, like a handful of powerful corporations are in control, every time we publish with one of those journals that is owned by one of those publishers, we are contributing to that maintenance of the status quo. And it doesn't feel like it's our fault, and it's not our fault. The system evolved without our permission in the past. But the maintenance of it is actually, our responsibility. And as much as that's a negative connotation, I think you can flip that and say, it's like the Spider-Man quote, like with great power comes great responsibility. I think it's the other way for us. It's like with great responsibility comes great power, because if we actively maintain this system with our daily actions, we can also actively destroy it and create something better. Destroy might not be the right word, but you know what I mean. Build something better.
Help it evolve.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting because when you were talking before about like the example of Stack Exchange for researchers, I thought that this would actually value the work that researchers are doing without like really being rewarded for that, because usually researchers are spending a lot of time either mentoring other people or educating on some topic, and I feel that it's all doing blog posts or really all of this work that is rarely valued. And I feel that this would be a really great argument for researchers to really start using more these practices, and because they would be rewarded for it. And based on that, I was wondering, how do you think a trainee who is working with more senior researchers who may not be very familiar with this type of with this way of doing research? How do you think they can convince their team to really move forward and start using more open science in a way? Like, what do you think? Or if you had collaborations in the past with people who may not be as familiar with it and still have their they're used to publishing this journal, they know that's how the process works, and so they are not really open to going to another type of journal that they don't know. Or how do you think how a trainee could convince their team?
It's tough because the open science space is so large that it really depends on what specific thing you're trying to convince someone of. If it's a question of publishing open, like open access, or even just publishing preprints, I think there's plenty of data now that you can point to, and someone could go back through the video and check out. I'm not sure if I had the references in there, but if anyone's interested, I could find the references and let them know. But if it's, say, like, using GitHub, for example, which the slides that I drew my talk from were created by John Tennant, and he has this really cool slide that unfortunately I don't have to hand, but it's kind of like, in his vision, the future of science is a kind of merging of GitHub, Stack Exchange, and Wikipedia. And like, those are the kind of core elements that could all work together and create a really ongoing, dynamic, exciting process. And this would sort of speak to your original point in that question, which was about how do we sort of reward the alternative behaviors? There's all kinds of behaviors right now, like you say, mentoring, teaching, teaching materials, that's not rewarded. None of these things that are incredibly important and useful aren't being incentivized. But if we had a kind of dynamic, ongoing system that was you could just upload anything to GitHub, all of your materials, and people could review it, and then people could review those reviews, and then you start build a sort of reputation score based on all of those metrics within this system, then all of those alternative products that you output could start to be rewarded within this sort of broader system. But I guess to me, the main obstacle is that we can't develop anything like that because we're not in control. So step one is getting control of the system, reclaim control of the knowledge production system, and then we can start to evolve a system like that. I don't know if that kind of answered your question, but it spoke to some of it.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting, and I have a following question on that. Who do you think should control these systems? Because we would still need some. Would this be the universities would control the websites that would share this information, or should it be the people? I don't know.
I mean, I'm a revolutionary, so I think the people. I think, I mean, in my vision, what I'm going to work on now is kind of a sort of cooperative model where researchers could band together to create a new system that we control. And this is the same sort of model that other models like Liberate Science have adopted. And so to me, the people that are providing value to the system should be able to guide the direction of the system itself. So right now, those that are guiding the system are universities and publishers primarily, but they're not the ones that are providing the core value. We are doing the core research. And so I think personally, I think we should be in control. Because I think if we're in control, then we can start to look after ourselves, number one, and start to evolve and develop systems that reward the type of behaviors that we want to see in our community. And I mean, I might be idealistic like this, but I generally believe that most scientists just want to do good research and be rewarded for doing good research. And I feel that if we were to cooperate in a sort of objective, cooperative fashion, then we could evolve a system like that where we're both in control, but also reward those behaviors that we want to see in our community.
Totally. And yeah, you could imagine that a consortium of universities and funding bodies and even not-for-profit funds could support the platform, because it's not that expensive in this day and age. And as long as you have that ongoing support for the platform, a rolling kind of committee of scientists in each field could be basically the editing team, the editor team, but not editing, because the crowd does the editing or does the feedback. So yeah, it kind of takes some parts of the existing model, but just disperse the power structure. Yeah.
And this is a big theme in the world right now, like decentralization of power. Like I think it couples very nicely with the problems that we have in academia. Like the power is very, very centralized to powerful universities, powerful publishers, and also powerful researchers. And that's excluding the vast sum of value that could be otherwise, input into a system. Like there are vast swathes of incredibly intelligent, passionate people around the world that just don't get a look in under the current system. It's hard to get their work reviewed. They don't get invited to be reviewers, but that's just untapped potential to me. There are so many highly trained people out there, including all of the, poor academics that couldn't find a job because there's just not enough jobs for us after we graduate, that would be happy to review work, particularly if there was some kind of like financial reward for doing so. Like I can imagine a system where you could actually build a career and never do like direct research yourself, but you could provide high quality reviews and evaluation of others' work that nevertheless progresses the field forward, and you get rewarded for that. But that doesn't exist right now. Like there's not a job for an independent reviewer. There should be, because that's specialization that has worked in every other industry throughout time. Like we're quite happy to specialize everywhere else, but in academia under the current model, we're expected to be everything to everyone, which is just not how an efficient system evolves. But if we could start to sort of create a system where your unique talents and the ways that you contribute to the system get rewarded appropriately, then people could start to develop a career where they just focus on reviewing, or they just focus on doing primary research, or they just focus on doing meta reviews, or so on. I think that would it would definitely help.
I think, wrapping that together with your question recently, your previous question, Anne, was, I don't know, what do you think about simply as trainees adding a section to our CVs and to our track record summaries in applications, regardless of whether it's asked for, that is open science practice, data repositories, like just emphasizing those bits, even if it's not technically on the criteria. Hopefully it gets into the reviewer's mind that, oh, this is a responsible and diligent scientist. And even if they know it's not a criteria, they themselves might hold the same views, and it might kind of, get into the system. Do you think that is a feasible way as a trainee to kind of, or is that?
I don't know. I've never applied for a job in science, so I don't really know what works. And the funding that I got was totally out of the blue. Someone just heard about my work and was like, here's some money to keep going. So I don't really know that I can speak to that intelligently. What I can say though is that there is a growing trend for where universities are asking people to demonstrate their open science-ness in their applications. And it obviously depends on the uni, how progressive it is, and it will probably depend on who your potential PI is and that sort of thing. But there is this growing trend towards asking people to show how they're being open. And so that is that's one of the benefits that I skipped through of open science, is that you can demonstrate your alliance with this future that we're moving into slowly but surely. And so I think, whether it's asked for or not, it's probably not, I can't see it being a bad idea, like here are my values and here's what I stand for and here are the ways that I've contributed. I think that can only help your application, but I don't know. maybe talk to some administration staff and see what they think.
Yeah. See if it can't hurt, but I guess, yeah, that was, I thought it probably couldn't backfire. If anything, it's just dismissed. And if not, then it might, yeah, be positive. We have a question from Marianne in Sparkle.
Oh, great.
And
Hi,
and what do you think about changes in the workplace that could support these cultural shifts? For example, more job stability earlier in our careers might make us more comfortable in cooperating and taking risks, which could translate into this increase in open science.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was part of the reason why I didn't think the traditional route was for me, like sort of jumping around every year, applying for more jobs, being forced to move around the world, that kind of thing. Job stability is such a huge issue. And I mean, to bring it back to free our knowledge, like, you know, in other industries, if you have poor working conditions, people band together, or they have banded together and gone on strike. You know, like this is the sort of the last resort for people that are being mistreated by their overlords to sort of reclaim some control and try and improve their working conditions. So I could imagine a campaign where we all say, you know, when 20% of our field agree this should be the norm, we won't accept anything shorter than a 2 or a 3 year contract or something like that. I mean, I think that's the sort of campaign we could work towards. I think it's, you know, like I said before, start small, get bigger. In terms of the short term, how to fix that problem, I don't have a clear solution. I think it's something that we could work up to, but I think it's also something that we need to sort of gradually reclaim that power over time before we can start making demands like, hey, treat us better, hey, give us like more permanent positions. But potentially, I mean, there are already, you know, unions that you could join, and I'm sure they would have some insights into this. So if you're interested in this, Marianne, then perhaps like contact your local union and they might have some suggestions on actions that you can take to try and create change at your local uni.
And I guess we can hope as well for the future that if and when our cohort becomes lab leaders, we can choose to focus on providing a stable job to one postdoc for a few years rather than several postdocs for 1 year, if that option comes up to us, you know, like we can kind of try and be the change if and when we get to that to that stage. Yeah, it is hard, I think. I mean, I was kind of wondering whether to raise it or not, but this question touches on it, and it's kind of the bigger system of capitalism within which all of these incentive structures are built, and taking down Goliath multinational corporations that make lots of money off of our work within the broader capitalism, like it's not there's not a small feat. So yeah, I guess better not to focus on that and to focus on the small things that we can change that hopefully become a wave.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a small feat until you consider like what is a journal without the content that we provide. You know, like if you think about what a journal is, it's absolutely nothing without the articles that we donate and sign over copyright over happily, and all of the reviews that we provide that say whether something's good or not good enough to publish in a journal. And ultimately, all of that work is what creates the value in the system. So I don't actually think it's, you know, theoretically impossible to take down to overcome these problems. And I also don't think that what I'm proposing or what we could achieve is antagonistic to capitalism. And in fact, the current system is not capitalist in any way. The current system is a monopoly. Like, and monopolies and capitalism don't go together. You need competition, healthy competition, under a set of rules that allow for that competition to drive down prices. And if we had a system where we were in control of the core research that gets produced, so all of the stuff that we donate basically for free, we were in control of that. But then beyond that, companies were able to add value where possible and where they see fit, then I think you would actually get the conditions for capitalism to evolve, because there's a like very related idea to the visions that I outlined before about separating the stages of the publishing pipeline. And to me, like all of the extra stuff that publishers do, which is like typesetting and advertising and all of the services that they do provide are actually useful in their own way. But the problem is that they're coupled with the like article review process right now. And so we need to decouple those processes, reclaim control of the review process itself, and then let competition evolve around that. I think that works quite well as a model, because then you're going to get publishers competing, on the level that is appropriate, and will create like healthy competition under a capitalist society, and in theory should drive down prices and create a better system for everyone.
Yeah, healthy competition.
Yeah. There's definitely space, like, and there's a lot of like really exciting publishers that have evolved in the last decade that have this vision in mind, that are trying to be the sort of overlay model on top of a core scholarly communication system. It's just that they're not the norm yet. We're still trapped with these Goliath commercial publishers that have evolved over the last 100 years or so.
I was wondering, because you talked about the decentralization of the publication of research, right? And I was wondering, because most of the big publishers are from America, or from North America, or from Europe, or from the Western world, and I guess giving this option to publish research in a more decentralized way would really serve underrepresented countries, because it's so expensive to publish in some journals that it's not accessible first to read research, but it's also not possible sometimes to publish research because of the cost. And I was wondering if you had collaboration, or if you feel also a lot of support from other countries that for other countries that way of doing research could serve even more.
Yeah, this might be a good time to bring up Cielo and Rethinking, which are basically Latin America showing us how it should be done, because there's a much better open culture in other parts of the world that Europe and America have not been adopting since the birth of the internet. And we're going on about we should move to this sort of author pays open access model, and that's what our funders are driving towards. But they've been doing open access properly for almost decades now, because Cielo is basically an open, a free open publishing platform where anyone can contribute articles, and because it's kind of become the norm in that sub community, it's just what people use and what gets incentivized locally. Now that doesn't, in my opinion, I think it's a great model that we should be sort of adopting, looking at, learning from. It doesn't, it hasn't spread through to the sort of global north or whatever, because we're in a different kind of problem. We're trapped in this collective action problem where powerful publishers and are involved, and universities are rewarding based on that. And so what I think we could do is learn from that model as a functioning model that has been working for many years now, and try to instantiate something like that in our system, which would then mean that everyone can be on the same sort of system and contributing equally. Does that kind of answer your question? Or?
Yes, definitely. And it's I didn't know the different. Is it journals that you mentioned, or systems?
Yeah, I forget on the spot. I believe it's a collection of open access journals.
Okay.
So kind of like overlay systems.
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah. But I guess you asked about like collaborations, like, and I mean, anyone, like the platform that we've been developing is open to anyone to sign, and encourage everyone around the world to sign, to show support for this change. But the key people, I think, to sign initially need to be those that are creating the problem, you know, like we talked about before.
Yeah.
And if people in you know, developing nations aren't the ones that are publishing in these journals, then they're not the ones that are maintaining the system. It's us that are publishing in these journals. And so key to changing that system is sort of those people that are maintaining it, to getting on board. But that doesn't mean that, like, I don't want people around the world to sign, because I think the more support we see for this, the better. I think this should be a global movement where we all band together and we all recognize that there's value everywhere that's not being appreciated.
Yes, it's very important to know that we can actually learn from what has already been done, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And there's already good. I mean, of course, very good ideas that have been applied. So it's good to know.
Yeah, there's so many wheels out there. We just need to start adopting them.
Exactly.
Sorry, I just had a brain fog. I was quickly looking up Cielo. It's very cool. I shared the link into Sparkle chat if there's anyone online who wants to check that out after the talk. Well, yeah, I guess coming back to trainees and the kinds of things you can envisage on FOC, Free Our Knowledge, and like using GitHub to post new issues as new campaign ideas. Can you kind of elaborate on a few more thoughts that have come up in your discussion so that we have more ideas on what things we could start posting?
Yeah, so I mean, firstly, if you haven't already, you could share the issues page in the chat, or actually, do you want me to put it in the chat, or actually, so you could share the freeourknowledge.org website, and that will show you the campaigns that are live. And then in the very top of the page, you can click proposals, which will take you to all of the campaigns that have been proposed. And so I'm punching that in the chat for you, Megan, as well. You can relay it over. But that's a starting point, I think, for people to see what has been proposed and the kinds of things that we could potentially do. Now, like if you compare the campaigns that are live versus those that have been proposed, you'll see that there's quite a lot proposed that haven't been published yet. And basically the difference is whether they kind of got some community support. So the one that we've posted this year got a fair bit of traction in the comments, and enough people helped develop it and refine the idea and just sort of just provide their opinion on what they think would work and actually just what they would sign. And that meant that we got it to a point where it was like, yeah, okay, we feel like there's, you know, at least 5 people that are willing to sign this when it goes live. And we all felt comfortable with where it was. And so then we put it online, and then we started collecting pledges. So really the other campaigns that have been proposed are just currently lacking that kind of level of feedback where we could help refine it to the point where we put on the website. But you can also look through there and just see if, you know, if there's not something there that you think should be a campaign, then you're most welcome to propose it, and then just, you know, I'll at the very least help you workshop it. But then hopefully other people will get involved and start commenting as well. But the range of use cases is, I think, infinite, you know. Like, so on the sort of, I guess you could pick any stage of the publishing, the research lifecycle, and develop a campaign for it. So it might be like at the very beginning, you know, one powerful feature is like when you're doing your literature search, rather than using something like Mendeley, which is an Elsevier owned product, you could use Zenodo, which is an open source product, and you can share libraries. So you might get, say, 10 people in your field to create a shared library on your topic of interest. And then you all just keep putting in articles and do it together. that would be like a really effective way to collaborate on what you think is the most important and interesting and progressive research for your field or your subdiscipline even. Pick another stage. Open data. This is something that someone just proposed during the brain hack last week. Oh, sorry, open code is what someone proposed. And that is basically, you know, like it's really frustrating for us all to rewrite the same code that someone else has already written for the exact same experiment. Much better if we just collaborate and share the code that we write. And then when I develop your code, I share it back with you. This is just the open source movement, right? But yeah, you get like 20 people to all agree to share code on your particular paradigm or your particular subfield or whatever it might be that interests you. Preprints is something that hasn't been proposed yet, and I'm kind of waiting for someone to propose because I think that's just like such a no-brainer for us all to be using preprints, and the data shows that it's really great for your citations, so it's actually good for your career as well. But there's still this kind of cultural obstacle, and sometimes people, like I've had pushback from supervisors where you want to like publish something and maybe it's not quite ready or whatever, but you feel like it's ready to get out there and get some feedback. But having that kind of cultural support that says maybe 100 people in my field, or maybe, you know, 67 have already signed this pledge saying they'd make their preprints available, and I want to join that and help make that a thing. You can then take that to your supervisor and go, hey, look, it's not just me, actually, like heaps of people in our field are keen to publish preprints. It's actually quite normal now. So that's another example. You could organize local actions, like you could make a campaign specific to your university, like to create, like I say, a new journal club, an open science reading group or something like that. The use cases are infinite. Anytime that there's a behavior that you would like to do alongside other people in your field, please use the platform, because that's what it's there for. And the more people that I think we get onto this platform and using this idea, the more we can like cross-fertilize campaigns and hopefully build that critical mass of support for change.
Awesome. I think that's a great point to wrap up on.
Yeah. So, yes, maybe we can just wrap up this amazing session. Thank you so much, Dr. Smout. It was really inspiring, and thank you for sharing your vision, because it's good to have new narratives. I mean, at least inspiring narratives to push us to adopt these practices and really make concrete plans on having a better science and just regaining our power, and with more responsibility. As you said, with more responsibility comes more power. So thank you for sharing that with us, and we were really happy to have you today with us. And thank you for the attendees.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Cooper and Megan, for this enlightening and inspiring discussion. And as representative of our OHBM SPC group, I, along with our friend Elisa Guma, would like to really thank you for this. And just a quick reminder that apart from our events, we also have SPC Space on the Planet Brain, which has 2 rooms. First is for the mentors and mentees to discuss virtually. And the second is for the job posting from researchers who are looking for trainees or ECRs. So our SPC team actually worked really hard to bring together all these events for you. So we sincerely hope you benefit from them. And also, if you like the work we do, so please do consider applying to be our team member. Thank you very much again, and enjoy the OHBM 2021. We both would like to say bye-bye to you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're clear. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.